Everything that I've done since I've been on this ship would have been impossible without you. I've failed to let you know that.
I always knew it.
I failed to tell you. I apologize.
Well, here we go, week 4 of season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. We're here to talk about the latest episode, Forget Me Not. So be warned of spoilers if you haven't seen that episode. We're going to get right into it. I'm Dan Gunther. This is Positively Trek. With me, as he is every week, of course, is the wonderful Bruce Gibson. Bruce, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. You already stated how I am. So, I feel wonderful. Actually, it's been kind of an interesting week, as we record this. We still are going through this presidential election thing, and everything is always too close to call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for the record, for people listening, we're recording this on Saturday morning. So as it stands now, yeah, we still don't know. I mean, we know, but we still don't know officially. But I feel like we need to bring another voice in here to talk about this episode, because there's a lot in this episode and we're going to try and spread it around as far as what we're discussing. So let's bring in, I'm going to say famed Star Trek YouTuber Ketwolski. Ketwolski, welcome to Positively Trek.
Oh, famed Star Trek YouTuber. I think you're giving me more credit than I deserve, but I love the intro. Thank you. Thank you so much. I am positively excited to be here. Boom. I'm sure you guys haven't heard that one before. So.
Love it.
Oh, good branding. Good branding.
Yeah, that's
love
right.
It.
Yeah. Yeah. Really excited to talk about Trek, Star Trek Discovery, and specifically this episode. Great episode. And I can't wait for us to deep dive into it. I definitely am pumped for it.
Awesome. Well, I say famed YouTuber. I think in some corners, maybe infamous YouTuber, but we're going to get to that in our next episode. We're going to deep dive into you with your whole YouTube thing, and we'll talk about some of that. I think you kind of know what I'm going to be asking you about.
I have an inkling of an idea. Yeah, I mean, some people think that, I'm really great, and some people think that, I'm not so great. I think that's probably the best way to put that. So, but yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we will talk about that.
We should have an election on the decision if we think you're great or not.
Well, I think it's just going to be too close to call. Just perpetually too close to call. Yeah.
Awesome. But yeah, so if you want to hear that discussion, stay tuned for our next episode. We'll deep dive into that. But for now, let's talk about Forget Me Not, because now, before I started recording, before I joined you guys this morning, I did watch a few minutes of your video review, Ketwolski, of this episode. And I have to say, we're kind of aligned on our feelings, because it seems like you overwhelmingly really enjoyed this one.
I did. I kind of really I tried not to get too crazy, because I had this issue when I was reviewing Lower Decks where every episode was my quote unquote new favorite, because it just continued to get better and better, which is, great for that show. So Discovery's always been kind of a mixed bag, I think, for most people. Even if you will overwhelmingly say yeah, I enjoy the show, there's still episodes in there that you're like, wow, that was pretty terrible. I don't know why they did that. So far this season hasn't been that much of a mixed bag. It's been pretty even keel all the way through, and with this episode in particular, I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I went back and watched a couple of my favorite season 2 episodes in kind of comparison, and I think this might be my favorite episode of Discovery so far. Maybe really neck and neck for second place, but overall this was a really fantastic episode. Yeah, it was really great. I really just enjoyed it so much. I really just captured my interest, and it was really fun and yet emotional. And there was a lot of exploring that we did for the Trill background stuff when we go into Trill, and then a lot of stuff with the crew. And yeah, I mean, we'll get into all that, but yeah, it was really just great. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. It's up there for sure. I can't I have a hard time with the word favorite, but it's funny you mentioned with Lower Decks, because I had that same issue, especially with the back half of that season. Like every new episode, I was like, oh, this is the best one.
Yeah. It was a serious issue with Lower Decks. And I say that as like a joke. It's certainly not an issue that everyone is better than the last one. That's what you want. But yeah, it makes you kind of come across as a little disingenuous after like 10 episodes of like, no, this one's the best one. They're like, pick one, guy. It's like, it's not my fault. Blame Mike McMahon.
I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's this episode that I declared that I was no longer going to say this is a favorite or whatever. I'm done with that because for that reason, I can say it's one of my favorites. Okay, so for example, when I watched DS9 and The Visitor first premiered, when I saw that episode, I got so emotional from that episode that I said, oh my gosh, I think this is my favorite episode of Star Trek. And I ran with that for a long time. But then it became more of like, well, it's in my top 5. Well, it's in my top 10. I don't know where. And then when I saw this episode, I was just as emotional watching this episode as I was The Visitor. And I thought, well, if The Visitor was my favorite for a while, should this be my new favorite? And I'm like, but there's so many other good ones. And I'm like, look, it's just one of my favorites. I'm no longer going to say this is my favorite Discovery or my favorite of season 4. It's just, it probably is my favorite of season 4. That I can declare because it's only a short list. Yeah, but I even tweeted out about how I compared this to The Visitor. And then all of a sudden I was getting all these likes. And then I realized because CBS All Access, Star Trek, whatever, Twitter retweeted that. Yeah. And I was like, okay, so obviously that resonates with other people.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to bring up that tweet, Bruce. I saw... Now, I was late watching this episode. I usually watch it as early as I can, but there were things going on, and I didn't get to it till Friday, which is weird for me. But yeah, I did notice that tweet, so I had kind of that kind of going into it, your very high praise for that episode. So what about it specifically earned it that high praise for you, or maybe more broadly, and we'll get into specifics as we go?
Well, it's just because of the emotion. Because when I watched The Visitor, I mean, we all know about that episode. It's just that emotion of a father and son relationship, and the son having to give up his father, but not being able to give up his father, and his father wanting his son to move on and let go. And there's just so much there. And in this, it was twofold. I mean, we have a situation here with Adira and the Trill and this is a journey for Burnham too, and it's like, her finding herself and her having to come with grips with her memories and dealing with someone that she loved, that she forgot about, that now she's remembering, but then is gone and is a distant past, but still is here. I mean, there's so many strings that we're pulling there, and then in addition to that, with the crew and what they're going through and being cut off from loved ones and having a situation where they can't even bond with each other because they're so distraught with their internal struggles, and watching how them kind of go at each other is disturbing and it's sad. And I mean, I've never, I don't cry that much, and I wasn't bawling, but I had a tear going down this side, and I'm like, okay, that's weird. And then I had another on this side. I'm like, okay, that's really weird.
Is it raining in my house? yeah.
Is there a leak in the pipes or something? What's going on?
Yeah, so I'll let me jump on that, because I would say that one of the biggest complaints that people have levied against Discovery over the last several years is that it's too much action, not enough focus on the crews. And I think that they have really toned that down quite a bit, I think, in this season. Now, the first episode was I think, just like a jumping off point to kind of get everybody jazzed about the future. But even in the second episode, we spent a lot of time with just Saru and Tilly and them kind of working together. Third episode was, again, kind of them getting together. And then this one, they really dive into that, where almost the plot of finding the Federation is completely secondary. That is actually the C plot of this episode, which is to continue the exploration of uncovering that mystery. The A and the B plots are Michael Burnham and Adira on Trill, and then Captain Saru and the crew of the Discovery. And that, I think, showcases the level of effort that people have given in terms of feedback to the creatives over there, and their willingness to listen to the positive and constructive feedback and make those kinds of changes so that we're really getting a lot more of the things that we want, which is, we've been saying that. Like, I remember, like, there was a big thing, like, at the end of season 1 going into season 2, like, a lot of people were saying, I don't even know the name of the majority of the people on the bridge. I don't know any of those people. And they actually had that sequence where Captain Pike went around and had everybody sound off their names, just as like a roll call, you know, just to let us all know. But now here we are, season 3, and it's like we know these people, and we're really attached to these people. And like you said, seeing them argue, it was like tough to watch because now we really know them and we're getting to know them even more. And I think it's great. I'm super glad that they decided to really tone down the like the craziness of the quote unquote mystery plots. And they really kind of turned it into a focus of the characters. I think we'll still wind up with a larger mystery plot ending, kind of season finale, maybe even a cliffhanger, since we already know that they're filming season 4. But I think as of right now, they're slowly building up to it. I feel like they're trying to really make sure that they earn that big, whatever it's going to be at the end of episode 13 or whatever. So I love it. I thought this is just a great episode. I could keep gushing about it, but I'll stop for now.
But yeah, I've seen it said online, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not in the camp that says like, oh, Discovery wasn't true Star Trek, but I've seen a lot of people saying like this is the most Star Trek-y episode Discovery has done so far, and in some ways I kind of get that. Like it definitely does tone down the action. It takes a breath. It focuses on crew relationships and the relationships among other characters and stuff. And yeah, it really does seem to put a pause on that perception that Discovery is just all action and no character beats. So in that sense, I get that argument that, you know, this is the most Star Trek episode we've seen of Discovery, or at least in a while kind of thing. So yeah, I get that for sure.
But, you know, it's interesting that it's also the most Star Trek because in a lot of ways it's not. In a sense, because when you think of Star Trek, you think, oh, everybody, at least our crew, everybody's getting along. And in this case, they're not. But that's what makes it so tragic, because we know everybody does love and care for each other. But there's tension, there's a rift going on between them because of the internal struggles that they have. But this whole episode is about broken relationships that don't need to be broken. Because even Adira not having Gray, I mean, the relationship broke not because Gray's gone, but just because she also doesn't remember. And then we have the relationship with Trill and the Federation that's broken too.
Right.
And that's just because of the circumstances. These are all solid relationships, but things just get in the way.
Well, you know, and that's the thing is, I feel like they really have finally cracked that nut, because I think they've constantly been struggling to figure out a way of getting a modern storytelling techniques invested into the construct of the feel-good moments of Star Trek. And you're right to say, like, this isn't, like, the fighting isn't really, like, quote-unquote Star Trek, but the way that they go about it and the rousing feeling at the end when they're all watching the movie together inside of the cargo bay, that was, it feels like they finally figured out how to bring in their more dramatic storytelling devices and then adding into that Star Trek flavor and mashing them together. I just think that they've really finally kind of hit a stride in some regards. And I think we should note that, because I think that they've done it kind of a little bit in the past, but this was episode, I think they really knocked it out of the park with that formula.
And I think this was always expected, at least for me, that, you know, as the seasons go, I think it will get better. I think they'll find their groove, and I feel this has proven that just the season.
You mean
alone.
how there's like 50 years of precedence for that, and how every single series has the same problems? Yes. And if only people would just take a minute and think about it, but whatever. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciated about this episode is those, you know, as disturbing as they are, those arguments and that sniping at each other, it feels very organic, and it grows out of a real situation that makes a lot of sense. Like, you know, I don't want to crap on all modern television, because that's certainly not the case, but there's so many shows where there's, you know, people scheming and plotting in workplaces and, you know, putting down other people to climb up themselves, that seems to just come out of nowhere. And this like really felt like, okay, what happened in episode 1 led into episode 2, you know, like it just really feels organic and makes sense for why Kayla is acting the way she is, for why Stamets and Tilly are acting the way they are. Why Georgiou's acting the way she is, I mean, that's a whole nother thing, but
she hasn't changed at all. And we love her for it.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about this trip to Trill. And one of the things that I'm kind of realizing with this new setting and the circumstances Discovery finds herself in is that we can have exploration stories where you're exploring the galaxy, but it's familiar places because of how much things have changed all these years. And I love this visit to one of the planets of a main character from the past and that whole thing with the little continuity nods and stuff. The one little nitpick, because I've always got to have one little tiny one, is in the Deep Space Nine episode Past Tense Part 1, when they're flying to Earth, Jadzia says, I was thinking the oceans could look a little more purple if I wanted to make it feel like home. So I was expecting Trill to have a purple hue to it, but that is the minorest of nitpicks. And I was like, it's very blue. But anyway.
You can change the settings on your TV.
Yeah,
so it does
that's
that.
right. Just close your eyes and imagine it being purple. There you go. Yeah. So I want to go ahead. You kind of touch on something, and I'm going to do my best to try to articulate this thought that I have in my mind, which is I felt like when Discovery first came out, we as Trekkies were holding the bag of the Star Trek universe in our hands, and we were looking at this Discovery show being like, I don't think you could fit in here. I feel like a lot of people were like, this seems a little strange, like they have like the technology's weird, and it's like kind of the era is not really right, and there was a lot of like weird things about it that didn't really, like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole in some regards. But now that we're here in season 3, the universe of Star Trek has now completely gone in a different direction. We are just as lost as the crew of the Discovery. So instead of, looking at the Discovery from the Star Trek universe perspective, now we're sitting on the Discovery with that crew looking out into this foreign universe, and we're rediscovering this galaxy together with them. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense, but it's almost as if instead of looking at them as though they're the foreign entity into trying to get into our franchise, like get out of here. I feel like now it's like we know these crews. We've been with them now going on 3 years. We know who these people are. And now we're exploring the strange unknown, even though it should be something that we do know, but we actually don't. We know just as much as they do, which is essentially nothing. And I feel like it's created like this weird new attachment that I have to the crew, because I feel exactly in the same position as they do now, as opposed to being like, I know how all this ends because I've seen, the Star Trek Picard show and I know where it's all at, but now we're way beyond that. And it's like, we're all foreign in this area together. So it makes it feel like we're almost a part of the crew. Does that make sense? Maybe I'm not articulating that correctly, but
no, that totally makes sense. Cause you're right. I didn't know what to expect on Trill. And even Burnham said, do we even get along with Trill at this point? We don't know what we're going to get. And if we travel to any other planets that are Klingons or Romulans or anything, Vulcan, I don't know what the situation's going to be like. It could be good or bad. So you're right. We're going through this journey with them.
It really feels like a clever thing the writers have done to get us on side now that you've articulated it that way. It's like all of our dreams and what we think of as Star Trek, they've somehow managed to tie that to Discovery and her crew. Like they're the old Star Trek coming and meeting this new universe.
Right.
And I'm like, wait, when did that happen?
Right. But you're right. Right. Exactly. It's like now they're the ones that represent the ideals of the franchise that we knew. And now all of us, even us as the viewer, we're the fish out of water characters. We're the ones that are out of water. And it's actually kind of really smart. And I hope that this season pays off in a lot of good ways, because this might be the quote unquote growing the beard season for Discovery. They're well on their way. They're getting the stubble. They have a mustache. They're getting there. But yeah, it's actually kind of, God, I wish we could get like Kurtzman on the show or something to talk to him about this stuff, because I wonder if they thought about that. Like, how do they make it so that the Discovery is actually the representing of the Star Trek ideals? And the best way to do that is put them in a place where it's so crazy that there's no other reference point other than the crew for us as Trekkies. It's really smart. I think it's really smart.
Well, let's talk about one of the new characters. So a character we got introduced to last week, Adira. We see her story play out in this episode as they journey to Trill. I've got to say, I feel like Adira is becoming one of the most exciting characters for me in Star Trek. Like, watching through this episode, by the end, I'm kind of like thinking of Ezri Dax, that kind of whole story, but like on a whole nother level. So her dealing with everything, this new association with all these past lives and that kind of thing. I'm really excited to see. There's so much potential packed into this character. What do you guys think of Adira as a character going forward from this point?
It's very interesting to me because, especially with this episode, I feel like I've known this character for a long time. She doesn't feel new to me anymore because we got so much information about her, but we didn't. I know I keep contradicting myself, but the point is, like, you know, as we're talking about earlier, we're on this journey with her. She's discovering who she is. She does not have certain memories that she's missing. So as she's learning about her past, we're learning it with her. And so there isn't a whole lot there that we know about her, but we've learned a lot at the same time about her as she's learning about herself. And I don't know why, but I just feel so comfortable with her, which that's the pronouns are going to change apparently, but just that discovery, like the name of the title, I just feel like I really love this character because I also think because of the age, being so young, also adds a dimension to this. Like Tilly was always like the young one of the crew, but I can see at some point Tilly and Adira kind of hitting it off, and now all of a sudden Tilly is mentoring this character.
Interesting, yeah.
I would say that even in the episode 3 introduction of the character, you know, that fun sequence between her and Stamets is where I kind of fell in love a little bit with this character. And I think that is in no small part due to the portrayal by the actress, Blue Del Barrio, I believe is her, is the name of the actress there. And I think that the portrayal and the way that, like, it's almost like a vulnerability, but also like a toughness, like you said, like it's like a teenager toughness where it's like, I'm strong and I don't need anybody, but also I'm definitely not strong and I kind of do need somebody, you know? And it's like this kind of like street toughness where it's like, I've had to survive on my own and I don't need nobody. But also, please, could you like hold my hand as I get into the big pool, you know? And it's like...
Yeah, it's like that scene with Burnham where Burnham's like, oh, fine, do it on your own, and starts walking down the corridor.
Right.
And Adira catches up.
Right, exactly, you know? And they play that up in a way that is not like too childish, but in a way that is, I think, still resonates and makes a lot of sense, and you can still feel that. And I just think that the character... I think, you know, like Dan, you said, like the character, it feels like we've known this character for a while. And I really do think that that's based off of the actress's portrayal and the writing and the fact that they've connected it to the construct of the Trill, which we're also, as Trekkies, are very familiar with. So we're able to have a lot of reference points there and understanding a little bit about the character. And like we said before, like the fish out of water construct, we're fish out of water with her too. She's a fish out of water, and she's rediscovering who basically all the memories of everybody that's inside the symbiote. So it's like this whole thing there. And yeah, I think the character is great. Fantastic addition. Honestly, both of the newer additions, you had Book from the first few episodes, which I'm sure he'll come back, and then Adira, both additions were awesome. Really fantastic.
Yeah, and we also got an introduction to another new character who their story kind of took a different turn than I was expecting, and it turns out that Gray is a past host of the Tall symbiont, which Adira now carries, but will apparently also be kind of continuing forward because Adira is seeing him in some form as well. So what did you guys think about Gray and his introduction into the story here?
I'm just laughing because as you're describing that, I started thinking about how Tilly had her imaginary friend that wasn't
that's
very
right.
They
nice.
love a good imaginary friend on Discovery. They love it.
Right.
I didn't even connect that.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I didn't until you were just talking about it, and I thought it'll be an interesting if there's a scene where Adira's trying to explain Gray to Tilly, and Tilly's like, yeah, I know, I had one of those too, and she turned out to be evil, and you know, whatever. But I was surprised too, because I was expecting Gray to be an actual live character that we meet on Trill.
Yes.
Because when they're going to Trill, I thought, okay, this is the point we're going to meet Gray,
Right.
and the symbiont's going to move over, and totally different scenario than I was expecting. And I thought, okay, is this a one-time thing? But then when we get to the end of the episode and seeing Gray sitting next to Adira, it's like, okay, so again, now I'm starting to think of Stamets and Colbert, where Stamets was seeing Colbert. It's like the same things where people have somebody that's close to them that keeps appearing that nobody else can see. It's kind of strange. But because this is a Trill, and we've seen this with other past Trill, like with Dax, we know they're in connection with past hosts. So it's nice that Adira still gets to carry Gray along with her.
I agree. I think I loved the introduction because I think it was unexpected. And I agree. Like, I think pretty much everybody was like, oh, we're going to meet Gray on Trill, and then they're going to kind of connect. And then maybe Gray is going to join the Discovery, and they're going to continue on with their adventures together with the crew. But the twist being that that's already over, which I guess connects back to the overall theme of this show right now, which is the critical event has already come to pass. You know, the burn, it's already come to pass. And now we're dealing with the fallout of uncovering that and dealing with that. This situation, Gray's already dead. Gray's been dead. And now we're dealing for years at this point. Because I think Adira had said that she was with the EDF for a number of years, I think, if I'm remembering episode 3 correctly. But there was a period of time where there was no remembering of who Gray was, and now we're dealing with that. It's already happened, so now we're kind of dealing with it. And it's definitely thematically connected in a lot of ways, and I thought it was a great way to introduce that character. I don't really know. I didn't really talk too much about this in my review of the episode because I don't really know what to make of the whole situation where Adira can still see Gray and what that means, because I don't necessarily know, and maybe you guys can, kind of guide me on this, is I don't feel like that may necessarily be the craziest thing for a Trill to be like kind of seeing, quote unquote, seeing them. I know that they're connected through like their memories and stuff like that, but has that ever not been said? Like, has it been ever stated that, oh, we don't see our past lives in that fashion? I don't know if there's like no precedence for that, or if it's something crazy different because she's a human and now this is like a new breed of quote unquote Trill.
Well, there's a Deep Space Nine episode in season 7, Field of Fire, where Ezri kind of does a little ritual to bring forth Duran, and he helps her in a murder investigation, and only she can see him. So I'm wondering if like this is like whatever biological processes that does to bring him out and mentally visible, if that has happened for Adira somehow without realizing, because again, lack of training,
yes,
the fact that she's a human, etc., it could be something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a bit of precedence there, so it could just be a residual from being in the pool, but you're right, it could be something to do with her being a bit of a hybrid. I think in this situation would probably be an appropriate term. I don't like the term abomination, like old boy was throwing out there in the episode. So there's a bit of precedence there then. So that's why I say I don't really know what they're doing with that, so I'm kind of like, just like, okay, that's a thing, and I think we'll find out what that means later. But you're right to say, Bruce, that there's a lot of connections with other characters on the show that have seen people, quote unquote, seen people that other folks can't see. So maybe this will be a way for her to connect with Tilly, because Tilly would be like, yeah, I mean, I was seeing somebody for a while, and they turned out to be a bit crazy. So,
well, I also like thinking about this as we're talking about Gray, that this is, it was presented in the press as a first transgender character, and I know some of us have said, well, we don't want them to really play it up like, hi, I'm transgender, and does everybody accept me? Because in the future we want to it's just normal, it's just
right.
It's nothing big, and that's really what they approach here. There was no call out like Gray shows up and says, hi dear, it's me, remember, I'm transgender. It just is. It's like there's some people that may not even realize that this actor is transgender to begin with.
Right. And they haven't really addressed it at all on the show, which I think they'll probably get into, because I think, Adira is supposed to be non-binary, and then Gray is is supposed to be transgender. But I mentioned this in my review video, where I feel like for as lot of flack as people like to give Discovery for being too woke and hitting people over the head with a quote-unquote woke agenda, I think that the relationships of, and I say non-conventional as lightly as I possibly can, and hopefully that's not language that upsets anyone, is like the relationship between Culber and Stamets, I thought was beautifully written and very well laid out. Like, it wasn't gratuitous, it wasn't cartoonish, it was played as a very serious relationship. They took it seriously in the show, and it was effective. And I feel like they did the exact same thing here, where it wasn't gratuitous and it felt very real and very raw. Like when Gray was laying on the floor dying, and Adira was like, "I'll take the symbiote," without even understanding what that means. I mean, I thought that was just a very raw, emotional moment, and it had nothing to do with any of the sexual preferences of anybody. It was just a raw moment between two people who love each other.
Yeah, and that's how I took it too. It's just the emotion. It's just these two people. I wasn't viewing them in a certain way.
Right.
It's just the love between two people. But at the same time, I thought, but how great this is too, that it's not about who they are or what they are. It's about who they are and their emotions. But at the same time, I thought, well, how great, and I don't really see this on television much at all. I don't know if I've ever, but a non-binary character in love with a transgender character. I mean, it's like, this is something that we don't see very often, and it's played so naturally, and it's so beautiful because of the love between these two. And that's what it's about. It's about love. It's
Right.
not about what you are. It's the love between two people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just the fact, again, like you said, that it's so normal, it's so natural, it's not even called out. This character is her boyfriend, and that's all the commentary we get on that, basically, right. which is excellent. So moving on, we've talked a little bit about the issues between the members of the crew, and we've got Kayla and what's been going on with her and her very disturbing haiku at dinner there that Saru organizes. But the impetus for that dinner is interesting and something that I want to talk about, because Saru is querying the computer for suggestions about, how to help the crew. And we see like the sphere kind of flash up on the screen a little bit. And then the voice morphs into a very familiar voice that we've heard before. So I'm obviously talking about kind of what seems to be the birth of Zora, the AI that controls Discovery's computer in the Short Treks episode Calypso. So this is the latest in kind of a string of hints that episode is going to somehow play into the continuity at some point. It seems we're on the road to there. So what did you guys think of this introduction of what will come to be known as, I'm assuming, Zora from that episode?
That's what I assume too. I mean, the voice was the same, right? At least it sounded very similar.
Right. I don't think I've been able to confirm, and this may already be in the credits there, but I don't think I was able to confirm that it was the same voice actress, but I'm pretty sure it was. So I think that a lot of us who follow these shows as closely as we do have already theorized that the sphere data was going to be causing the morphing of the computer AI on Discovery into the character of Zora. The one thing I will add as well into that melting pot of developing this new persona is the memories and the core feelings of Arium, because they downloaded Arium's information into the computer of Discovery as well. And I'd have to go back again and re-splice through that sequence, because there were a number of different voices being heard, and I'm curious if one of those was Arium's. And I think that all three, so you have the regular computer AI, the sphere data, and Arium, I think the three of those are going to merge together and make the Zora construct, which I feel like does connect back to not only the sentience of the sphere data, but, Saru said at the end, like, he thinks that the sphere data may be looking out for them now, as opposed to, they looking out for the sphere data. And I think Arium's emotional connections to the Discovery crew may be impacting the personality of Zora to really protect the crew, because that would be something that Arium would want to do, obviously. And we saw a lot of that in her death sequence, where she tried to override her programming and do everything she could in order to stop hurting the crew. So I think we're definitely on that road. We're on that road. But of course, then that adds to the question of how the hell does that tie into sitting in a nebula for 1,000 years? That's the big question, is what the heck is that about? What is all that about? And I don't think we have an answer to that right now. Theories, but no answer. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting too, that you said about Arium's voice, because two actresses have played Arium.
Correct.
And in the first season, it was Sarah Middich, I think is her name. And she's now playing a different character on the bridge. And she's the actress with the long blonde hair. Yep. She could lend the voice of Ariam because she's still part of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot there, and I think that we're right on the money. I think everybody was pretty much right that the sphere data is what was going to cause the Zora construct to be created. But now it's the question of what about the rest of that episode? And I don't think we really have a solid answer. What are I have my own theories about that, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think. What are your theories as to what is it means by 1,000 years in a nebula? Is it 1,000 years from this season, or are we jumping back in time, or what are you thinking?
I think, Dan, you had a theory that I loved.
I had a theory. I'm not convinced of it anymore. Actually, I was never convinced of it. It was just a theory. But now with some other stuff, I'm not too sure. But my initial theory was that, like, okay, Georgiou has to be back for the Section 31 series. I think she somehow takes Discovery back in time and leaves it in a nebula waiting for them for 1,000 years, and they get their ship back at that point. There have been some comments. I think Kurtzman said the Section 31 series takes place in a surprising setting, a surprising time and place or something. So I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm just, the assumption that it's back in the 23rd century might be totally wrong. So that's kind of called that into question for me. But yeah, I'm not sure at this point.
Well, if the Kurtzman comment, a surprising time and place, it could just be your same theory, but instead of Georgiou going back to the 23rd century, she goes back to the 24th or 25th century and abandons the ship in the nebula for the Discovery crew. Be. So yeah,
because Zora does say almost 1,000 years, which could be, I think, anywhere from 800 to...
Right.
950.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, who knows? Yeah. So that's a good point.
I think that your theory is correct. I think that I actually think that there's actually more evidence in this episode that there's going to be a jump back utilizing the spore drive, because there was a specific set of emphasis on Saru saying, Stamets, I need you to develop a way to develop an interface that doesn't involve you in order to use the spore drive. And they're talking about dark matter. And I think this dark matter construct is what's going to enable them to be able to jump in time, not just through different areas of space. The big question I have is, why would Georgiou need to take the ship back? And why would the Discovery crew let her do that? Because as we know, there's only one shuttle left in the cargo bay of the Discovery. So that means that did all the crew load up into the rest of the shuttles, and then they left the ship and let Georgiou jump back, and then, they turn around and there it is in the nebula where she parked it. Basically the plot of Back to the Future 3 is that what we're going to be doing here? I don't know, but why would they do that? I don't know, but I think that that's the most likely thing, because right, she just says almost 1,000 years, which could mean anything. And they can do a little like mini retcon with that 1,000-year thing where it's like, well, she said almost 1,000 years. What we really meant to say was 823 years, because that's when Georgiou jumped back, and that's how long it's been sitting there. So I think that's a fair assumption, I think. But Bruce, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, just based on what you guys are saying, I do believe that this is probably going to happen. And to your point, why would Georgiou do this, and why would the crew abandon the ship? I just wonder if Georgiou she's all about power. And at some point she's like, think of all the power I would have with this knowledge of the future and taking that back to the past. And if I could just, convince the crew, make the ship is about to blow up, and they leave thinking it's going to blow up, and they all leave in the shuttlecraft, and then it's like, nope, it's not. Then whatever goes back to the past, and that's where Section 31 starts, is her trying to get whatever power as she's part of Section 31 because of the knowledge she has of the future. And that could be a whole nother interesting twist, because that would certainly be a sequel to this series, because you really can't get into Section 31 and understand everything she's doing unless you really watch this series, because it's taking that knowledge from the future into the past.
Right. And it could be a situation where she jumps into the past in order to take control of Section 31 in an attempt to stop the burn from occurring, because maybe they uncover, was it an alien species that was doing something that maybe she's going to go back in past to try to stop them? Is it a situation where certain technologies were being developed by Starfleet, and she's going to try to go back in time to kind of steer them away from that to see if they can.
Maybe it was Section 31 that caused.
Maybe it was
burn.
Section 31, right? And maybe she thinks like, if I go back and I lead them, I can prevent them from doing this, and we can save the universe from dealing with the burn. And that could be a bit of a reset. And maybe the crew's like, well, we can't all go because that's going to contaminate the timelines too much. But maybe if you go back by yourself and then hide the ship, it should be better. I don't know. We're spitballing ideas here. Maybe there's a lot of plot holes in that idea, but there's something here. I think we're very close to figuring it out. I feel like we're super close to understanding where this may be going, but they could pull something crazy on us. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day where I was theorizing that wouldn't it be weird if the Discovery jumped to an alternate universe and they don't even realize that they're in an alternate universe because it's so far in the future that they're not even aware of the fact that they're in a totally different universe. Could be Kelvin, could be Mirror Universe, could be something else. I don't know, but they wouldn't know yet at this point. Maybe not Mirror Universe because there would be Terran Empire stuff everywhere, but you know what I mean? Like maybe there's some other twist that we're not even cognizant of that they're going to pull out on us by the end of the season. But I think based off of the evidence available right now, I think we're pretty much on the money.
Yeah, no, definitely. And lots of interesting theories and ways we could go. New crazy theory that, probably isn't the case, but I think predestination paradox. They send Giorgio back to prevent the burn, and she's what actually causes it in the first place. That's... I hope not, nice. But there you go.
Well, and it's always like these little bits of surprises and stuff. And this is something that's been nagging at me for a while. But, when we see that Delta shield in Discovery and it's got like that 1/3 with the line going down, it's so different from any other Star Trek past and present. But I'm thinking, okay, in that time frame, in the 23rd century, that's what it looked like. But then when we go to the future, we see on that space station or whatever, the box and stuff has that line again. And it's like, I don't know. There's just a part of me that thinks, is this the prime? I know it's the prime timeline, but is it just a little skewed? Did something happen? Or I don't know. There's just something a little off about it. I know the visual representation of the series is just kind of a reimagining of it, but there's still a piece of me that thinks, when they plant little seeds like Burnham's mentioning the Gorn or, whatever, there's just things that make me wonder if they're giving us little hints that this might not be quite the timeline we think it is.
Well, I think that the visual stuff is kind of, I think is subjective because it's like, okay, obviously they brought some of the creatives over from the Kelvin Universe movies, so there's going to be some crossovers in terms of visually designs and stuff like that. And yeah, they were reimagining some of the things, so that's like, okay, maybe that's something, maybe it isn't. But I would say a hard line of a breadcrumb is, and they haven't resolved this yet, which is why is it that when they jumped into the future, they did not arrive at Terra Elysium like they were supposed to? They were supposed to be at Terra Elysium, and they were supposed to meet up with her mom, and they weren't there. And when she reached out to Terra Elysium, they had never heard of Dr. Burnham. So yeah. I don't think that that's a coincidence. I don't think that that's just lines that they're just reading off and they're writing off. Right now, obviously, the mission is to be finding the Federation and getting things kind of squared away. But I think that that's something. There's a reason why they didn't arrive at the location they thought they were going to. I really do. And I think that there's something going on there that they haven't revealed yet. So there's breadcrumbs. There's breadcrumbs for sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Dr. Burnham thing is a really good point too, because they made an actual effort to call that out in the episode. Yep. So if they were just going to forget that storyline, I feel like they just wouldn't bring it up, but I don't know. There's something there for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I say like there's with the available evidence that we have now, I think our theories are pretty solid, but I feel like there's more yet to be revealed, not only just about the burn, but about what's going on in this universe. And imagine that twist that they're actually not in the same universe, that they thought maybe they're in a parallel universe. And there was just something crazy with the time suit, because it's just crazy time suit stuff. Like they just got the crystal, they just made the suit. They didn't know how it worked, to be honest. They really didn't. And she was having all those problems getting it to work at the end. And, and then she did all these time jumps and stuff. So who knows what's going on? It's interesting. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting.
Well, we brought up Georgiou briefly. One other thing that I want to bring up with regards to Georgiou is just something I noticed in this episode a couple times that I'm curious to get people's takes on, is her interactions with Linus. And I don't know if anybody else noticed this, or I've seen a few people bring it up, but like at the dinner, Linus is pulling out her chair for her and handing her popcorn at the movies. Like, what's going on here? Is Linus smitten? What's happening? Are we shipping these two? Like, what is happening here? Given their interaction a few episodes ago as well.
I never thought anything of it until I saw somebody mention it online. I was like, oh. I mean, I just figured it's just Linus is just a really nice guy, and Giorgio isn't. And so it's a great play of the two of them, you know, her having to deal with somebody who's just a nice gentleman. That's all I took it for.
So I would say that you would be right, Bruce, and that may be the case. But there is something that happened in the very beginning of maybe it's the middle of the second episode where Georgiou gets out of the turbo lift, and I forget who she's talking to.
Non,
yeah, it was with Non.
Yeah.
And she stops Linus and asks him about his eyesight capabilities, or like his vision capabilities, and he's like, "Oh, I can see all sorts of crazy stuff." And I forget what his line is. I'm paraphrasing. You guys know what I'm talking about. And we never resolve that. We never understand why she asked him that question. We never understand why the two of them walked off, really, and what necessarily they could have been talking about. I mean, am I remembering that correctly? I feel like we didn't really get a resolution to what the heck it was that they were doing together. And since then, they've had like this really weird interaction where, like, are they friends? Are they doing something weird? Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it's a romantic relationship. It could be, but it could be anything. But there is some type of relationship. There is something going on between those two. And maybe, they've developed a friendship because she has Linus working on something with her.
It's possible. It could be a romantic relationship, though. I mean, her being from the Terran Empire, I don't think she has any qualms about just doing all sorts of weird stuff. We had that really interesting sequence in season 2 where she's talking about some kind of threesome, I think, between Stamets and Culber and herself, and she's open to all sorts of different things. So who knows? Maybe she's getting a little friendly with Linus. But yeah, it is interesting. There's something going on there. I don't think we know what it is yet. I don't think it's going to be like major plot revealing, like, oh yeah, he's been working on this micro universe and like some kind of crazy thing, you know. I think it's just going to be something that's like, oh, that's interesting. There's some off-camera development there.
Awesome. Yeah. It's just there. Yeah. There's just enough to like make people who are watching closely kind of go, what's happening there? So yeah, I'm nothing to really base any kind of theory on at this point. It's too early, but let's keep an eye on them, I think, is our going forward.
Oh my gosh, I figured it out. So they fall in love, but then he eventually rejects her for someone else. She gets mad and says, if I only had another chance with him, and she takes the Discovery back in time so she could get Linus earlier before he meets this other person. And that's why she goes back in time and abandons the crew in the future. It's a love story.
But overshoots it just by a few hundred years.
Whoops. I would say it's even more selfish. Like there's a specific aphrodisiac she wants to have with her and Linus, and it's only in the past. So she jumps all the way back just to get it.
I love it. I love
it. A lot of effort.
Yeah. Well, she would do that because she's Giorgio, and we love her for it. So
yeah, for sure. Well, I guess final thoughts on the episode Forget Me Not. So Ketwolski, why don't you lead us off with just kind of your final thoughts and wrap up?
Final thoughts. I know we didn't get a chance to really talk too much about it, but one of the big standout moments I think for this episode was Wilson Cruz. Always been a great character, but I really feel like he's stepping into the role of a bit of ship's counselor in some regards, and I thought that he really did a fantastic job carrying a lot of the the proper emotional threads throughout the episode, especially for the Discovery crew and his interactions even with Burnham, even though it was for just a simple sequence. But yeah, Wilson Cruz did a fantastic job. I want to see more of that in the show. So hopefully there's even more. We just keep dialing that up because I think he's a great actor, and I want to see more of that. Overall final thoughts of the episode were, if the rest of this season is at the same caliber of writing of this one, then I would say that at the end of all this, Star Trek Discovery has officially grown its beard and has become a successful show. So if they keep this up, they keep up this momentum, they keep up this quality, I think we've got a good, solid season, and I think that everybody can enjoy it. So I look forward, and I can't wait for the rest. I'm literally wish that they would just release all the episodes already so we could just binge through it because I want to know what's going on. So I loved it. Yeah, really great.
Awesome. Bruce?
Yeah, and to your point, not just the writing, but the directing of this episode, if we have this kind of directing going forward, the editing, the whole pacing. I mean, everything about this episode to me was nearly perfect. And just little moments, I was just noticing things of the approach the director had. Like, for example, Culber and Detmer having their talk. It wasn't that they were talking in sickbay or the corridor, but just standing there in the doorway and just leaning against either side of it and just being there. Like, that's an unusual shot. We typically don't see that in Star Trek. You're either in or out. You just don't stand at the doorway and just leaning against it. Two people like that. Just little things like that peppered throughout with different shots I was seeing in different angles of things. And if go back and watch just the way the camera works on some of these or the blocking of the actors, you'll see some really different things in there. And then also, in addition to that, little things like them eating the meal together. I love that whole scene, but if the food is colorful like it is in Journey to Babel, so I picked up on that. And then just, for example, Adira going through her whole thing, what do you call it? That realm she's in where she's communicating with the symbiont, and Burnham's there. And then when she finally gets to the point where she now can communicate and understand the symbiont inside of her, then the past hosts walk up. And I lost it at that point too, believe me. And if anything, I want to screenshot that. I didn't get to do that, but I wanted to see the different uniforms, really study those different uniforms. But there's so much here. I mean, yeah, overall, I mean, perfect episode. It's one of my favorites, remember? And definitely my favorite of this season, even though I loved every episode so far this season. So yeah, I mean, if I had to like rate this, I would give it 5 out of 5 Trill symbionts without a host.
Wow. Yeah. Strong rating. Good rating.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys have said. This was an incredible episode. Bruce, I'm glad you brought up that sequence with the different hosts. I was going to mention that as just, like I was getting really emotional at that point. Of course, then, you know, when Gray steps out from behind and it's just the water works a little bit at that point. Great stuff. You know, the what I call Starfleet uniform porn as well. Like I kind of want to check that out and really look at that stuff. We saw like the Picard era uniform and then some other ones that we have no idea of, and Admiral Tull's uniform as well, his insignia. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want that pin now. Just a lot of fun as far as the, I think the interactions of the Discovery crew. That's something we've gotten a lot of people asking for, is more featuring the crew. I think like this is the most that Kayla has ever said outside of a bridge scene talking about piloting or something like that.
Yes.
And she's incredible. She's a great actor. And I love seeing that interaction. And
Burnham, I mean, Sonequa Martin Green, I thought is really good. I mean, she's always been good, but just her character seems more like natural, just that she can relate to others better, you know?
Well, they're writing her better.
Yeah.
I feel like they're giving Sonequa more to work with as opposed to just being I don't want to say just drama all the time, but she was always very heavy. Everything was on her shoulders. And I think that they're really giving her an opportunity to breathe a little bit and really show off her character more. And I think that's all, you know, Sonequa, I think, is a fantastic actress, and they're giving her more to work with, and we're all the better for it. We're benefiting as the viewer. Absolutely.
Yeah. For sure. The other thing that I wanted to call out, of course, was Blue Del Barrio as Adira. I think she has a really great arc through this episode, and just the way she carries herself at the end versus the beginning. I absolutely believe this is a totally different character who's incorporating all these past lives now. And, you know, the imagery may be a little cliched where she comes out of the pool and is, you know, reborn, right? But it works. Like, I think that's a turning point for her character, and it turns out really well here. So yeah, if I was going to rate this, I'd give it one really good piece of Droog Beetle pie. So yeah. Excellent episode.
I need to get a printout of these rating systems here.
My rating of just giving it one something really good, it basically came out of watching Lower Decks and realizing, like, my first few episodes are 10 out of 10. Where do I go from here? So I'm like, okay, I got to do something different.
Now we go back to 1. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Ketwolski, of course, you're going to stick around with us and we're going to talk a lot about you and your YouTube career and that sort of thing. But for those of our listeners who maybe are just listening to this episode, where can people find you online and follow what it is that you do?
Yeah, you can definitely find me on YouTube. You can just go on there and it's just youtube.com/Ketwolski. You'll be able to find the channel there. I'm over on Twitter as well, at Real Ketwolski, and I have a Facebook group as well, and email. If you guys want to hit me up on email, it's just ketwolski@gmail.com. You can message me stuff, and I always try to respond back to people whenever I can. So if you got questions or comments or feedback from me, or we want to talk about Star Trek, just hit me up, and if I have the opportunity to get back with you, I absolutely will. I don't take it personally if I don't. I just get a lot of messages throughout the day, and it keeps me busy. But yeah, I look forward to hearing from folks and feedback from this podcast, and yeah, I look forward to talking more about Star Trek.
Awesome. And Bruce, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Admiral_Rex, and on this show, I used to have a whole list of things, and then I cut back, and now I'm always like, wait, what am I forgetting? But I will mention occasionally on the Star Wars Report podcast, which Dan just recently joined me. We've gotten some good feedback on that show.
Ooh, okay.
Excellent. Yeah, that was a lot of fun too. So thanks for having me on there. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Kertrats. That's KERTRATS, just Star Trek backwards. YouTube.com/Kertrats Productions, where I make YouTube videos. And of course, check out the show on Twitter at Positively Trek, and search Positively Trek on Facebook. Join our Facebook group. A lot of fun. We have a lot of great discussions there. So yeah, we'd love to see you there. Well, thank you all so much for listening this week. And until our next episode, stay positive.